information from a pretty balanced perspective.
Online at kvnutalk.com and on the KVNU mobile app.
KVNU News Time is 5:05. I'm Bill Walter with this news update brought to you by Northern Steel Building. Law enforcement is asking for the public's help in locating a 29-year-old man who escaped from a work release program at the Cache County Jail. Bayron Jose Barrera was last seen in Hiram Monday morning. According to the Cache County Sheriff's Office, Barrera is described as being white Hispanic, 5 feet 6 inches tall, weighing 150 pounds with black hair and brown eyes. He's believed to be driving a black Honda Civic with a Utah license plate F645ZW. Barrera was last seen at his fiance's apartment near 61 South, 400 West in Hiram at around 8 a.m. He reportedly failed to return to jail Monday night. If anyone has information about Barrera's whereabouts, they are asked to contact law enforcement. KVNU News Time is 5:06. KVNU weather for tonight. Cloudy, chance of snow this evening. Snow after midnight. Accumulation up to 2 inches. Overnight low in the low 20s. Rain and snow Wednesday morning, then snow likely in the afternoon, 1 to 3 inches, and high temperature in the upper 30s. Snow likely Wednesday night, up to 2 inches accumulation, and then snow and rain Thursday morning, rain in the afternoon with accumulations possible. High temperature on Thursday around 40. It's been to 33. Right now it's 29 degrees at KVNU. KVNU weather is brought to you by Wheatland Seed. With higher fertilizer prices and drought conditions, 2022 will be challenging. So lower your input costs during Wheatland Seed's preseason sale. All oats, barley, cover crops, and alfalfa will be priced below last year's prices. Visit wheatlandseed.com for more information.
A building is just a building until it's your building. It's where you work, where you create, and where you store your valuable equipment. You take pride in your building, so make sure it's built right and built to last. Northern Steel Buildings will guide you from concept to construction. For your commercial, agricultural, or industrial steel building, visit northernsteelbuilding.com to see their quality work or call 435-677-7300. Northern Steel Buildings. Value from concept to construction.
KVNU News Time is 5:07. A 21-year-old Logan man convicted of shooting an 18-year-old last summer has been sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison. Gabriel Sia told the court he was now trying to change his life. Sia was sentenced during a virtual hearing in First District Court Monday morning. He previously accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to reduced charges of aggravated assault, a second-degree felony, and possession or use of a firearm, a third-degree felony. On June 17th, Logan City police officers responded to the shooting of an 18-year-old male after a group fight involving several individuals, including Sia. The victim was shot through the arm and the bullet grazed the side of his head. On August 1st, police responded to another incident involving a firearm on Main Street in Logan. Officers reported a violent fight occurred involving several individuals. At least one of the two victims was pistol whipped. Sia attempted to flee the scene and was later taken into custody. During Monday's sentencing, defense attorney Joe Saxton said Sia took responsibility for his actions and had strong family support. He asked the court to consider sentencing the defendant to 240 days in jail instead of prison. The shooting victim's mother told the court that Sia and the other individuals involved attempted to cut her son's throat, shot him, and left him for dead. She asked the court to refrain from any mercy for the defendant. Judge Brandon Maynard ordered concurrent sentences of 1 to 15 years and 0 to 5 years in the Utah State Prison. Maynard also said that he would recommend credit for time served and ordered Sia receive treatment while in prison. And a man from Price died in Carbon County after a crash occurred Monday morning. They said at about 7:30 a.m. a red Dodge Neon was traveling west on State Route 123. The vehicle drifted off the right road edge, overcorrected left, and crossed the center line. It then went off the south edge of the roadway and overturned. They added that the 48-year-old man from Price was the sole occupant and was thrown from his vehicle and found deceased when officers arrived. KVNU News Time is 5:10. For more details on these and other stories, visit CashValleyDaily.com.
Where you find out. News Talk KVNU 610 AM and 102.1 FM.
This is Police Chief Gary Jensen from Logan City Police Department. A number of scams are occurring throughout our city and county. These scams are highly emotional and demand immediacy that you pay, and you pay now. They will say they are from the IRS, the Sheriff's Office, the Police Department, utility companies, medical facilities, or even romance scams. The scammers do their homework. They can do a simple check on the internet of your name and find out where you live, where you used to live, even people that are associated with your name. They are always highly emotional phone calls that demand immediate payment or something bad will happen. Slow down and diffuse by asking questions. If they want you to pay with Bitcoin or gift cards, this is a scam. Be careful. Hang up the phone call is the best thing that you can do. Again, slow down and think. React by hanging up and don't become a victim.
For our military families, Americans can show appreciation through education.
Because of you, I will walk across the stage.
I can show my children that they can succeed at any point in their life.
I will be able to make a positive difference in the lives of other people.
I was able to achieve my dreams and work on eradicate some of the world's top diseases.
I was able to get the education that I always wanted.
Because of you, I will be paying it forward and serving my nation.
Join us at ThanksUSA.org.
Hi, this is Gordon Deal. Wednesday on This Morning, America's First News. The new year is already starting to feel like 2020, only this time schools are closing because of staff shortages, not because they prefer virtual learning. Also, where is President Biden on promises to shut down the coronavirus and bring unity to Washington politics? And tips for seizing your dream job since the chance is here. Wednesday on This Morning, America's First News. From 4 to 6 on News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102 FM. Your station for news and talk.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People, Hour 2 of today's show, Tuesday, January 4th. I'm Jason Williams, Bill Walter here in the studio as well. And being the first Tuesday of the month, it is time for the For the People Book Club. Every first Tuesday of the month at 5 o'clock, our good friend Craig Petersen joins us here in the studio to talk about what he's been reading lately, make book recommendations. And this month, for our first episode of 2022, we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of focusing on a single book by a certain author, we're actually going to focus on an author. And Craig, appreciate taking some time to join us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
You braved the weather to come down to the studio today. But I'm excited about this because you're going to be talking about someone that has impacted. The thing I always find about this author we're going to be talking about today is he's influenced more things than people realize. And then when I've had this experience myself, when someone says, "Oh, that came from so-and-so," I'm like, "Oh, okay, makes sense then." From quotes that there are things that we all repeat that are actually writings of this man. And then, of course, everyone has seen C.S. Lewis is the author. Everyone has seen or heard or knows something about The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, his children's fantasy series, although I've heard people argue it's not for children. That children loved it because of the fantasy elements, but he wrote it for adults. I don't know if that's true, but
you talked about it as impact. Just an example. If you were to ask members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, what maybe is the most famous conference talk, one answer might be a talk that Ezra Taft Benson gave on the dangers of pride. And as you look through that talk, in fact, I was reading it today, what you find is that he borrowed and often attributed, but not always attributed, C.S. Lewis, because C.S. Lewis, in one of the books we'll talk about today, did extensive kind of writings about the nature of pride. And so he really did have a broad impact. In fact, he actually has been quoted by LDS leaders more than any other non-LDS figure.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that... Now he writes... I've always sort of thought of him in my own head as sort of a Christian scholar. But he writes very, for the most part, non-denominational.
Exactly. Yeah. In fact, we'll talk about that later on. In fact, he purposely attempted to be non-denominational in many cases. He was a member of the Church of England, but...
okay.
But in fact, he kind of talked about, where the controversies are is in the denominations, not in fundamental Christian beliefs.
I honestly, I think one of the most important observations ever. If you run into conflicts of some kind, it is almost always a conflict of denomination. Yeah. And it always sort of surprised me, and I know he's written about this, when, look, we all believe the same thing. Yeah. He says basically that at a certain point in one of the few essays I've read of his.
He does, yeah. Let me, if it's okay, Jason, it's hard to understand him in particular without understanding kind of where he came from and who he was. So can I do a hopefully relatively brief biographical sketch?
Oh, please. Even if it's not brief. I'm excited because this is an author that I'm familiar with, but I don't know a lot about, so I'm here to learn too.
Actually, his life is about as interesting as his book. So he was born in 1898, lived to be about 64, so he didn't live to be a long time. He was English. He was actually Irish, and then moved to England.
Oh.
But he came from a very wealthy family. One of the great tragedies of his life was his mother died at 10. In fact, what we'll see as we learn about him is he had some really unique relationships with women.
Yeah.
So his mother dies at 10. His dad is a lawyer, and he's kind of a tyrant. He's a very distant, demanding man, and he had a difficult relationship, and yet at the same time, the money was there, and a lot of the things that C.S. Lewis did to begin with really were funded by his dad. So his mother dies. His mother dies, and he's sent off to a boarding school, and the boarding school is an incredibly unpleasant experience for him. He was small, he was unathletic, and he got pushed around, he got bullied. There maybe was some different types of abuse. Just to give you an idea, the boarding school closed about a year later, and the headmaster was declared insane and sent to an asylum.
Oh, really?
So
wow,
you get kind of a feeling for that.
Ooh.
He was raised religiously, but became an atheist in his teens. One of the things that happened to him in his late teens, he was sent to a tutor. This was a one-on-one tutoring in this guy's home. The guy was an atheist. And the guy was just incredibly hard on him. It was one of these kind of Socratic learning things where Lewis was there, and every single word that came out of Lewis's mouth, he was forced to defend. And so the experience for him was difficult, but on the other hand, it really probably honed his analytic skills.
Interesting.
Then he gets to be about 18 or 20, and it's World War I. And so he volunteers. He's sent to the trenches of France, sees death and carnage. He's actually wounded. And while he's there, he has a friend, and the friend's name is Patty Moore. And he and Patty make a pact. And here's the pact. If one of them's killed, they agree that they will take care of the family of the other. And lo and behold, Patty gets killed. And C.S. Lewis is as good as his word. And so he takes in a sister of Patty Lewis and also his mother, who's about 18 to 20 years older than C.S. Lewis. And basically, he supports them until her death for about 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And he refers to his mother. It's kind of a complex relationship, and there's been speculation that the relationship may have been a little bit odd, but nobody really knows for sure.
Sure.
Then after that, he has a long career. He spends his career as a professor at Oxford and Cambridge. But in his teen, he became an atheist. And then at age 30, he switches to become a theist. That is, he accepts the notion that God exists, but in kind of an unstructured sense. And then a couple of years later, he becomes a Christian. And the story of him becoming a Christian is really kind of interesting. While he was at Oxford, one of his best friends was J.R.R. Tolkien. And Tolkien, I don't know if a lot of people know this, Tolkien was a devout Catholic. And Lewis and Tolkien have long conversations about Christianity. And his conversion to Christianity is just fascinating. So he gets on a bus, and he gets on a bus as an unbeliever. They ride the bus, and they're going to a zoo. And he says by the end of the bus ride, he believed that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. Is that about as unusual?
No, because of the bus or the zoo?
No,
I mean, it could be either.
I don't know. I think he's just thinking. about it.
That's interesting.
Yeah. There's a movie you and I were talking a little bit about. It came out in the theaters. It was here in Logan last November. It's actually streaming. You can get it right now. I highly recommend it. The movie is called The Most Reluctant Convert, The Untold Story of C.S. Lewis. And the untold part isn't right because it's been told time and time again. But it's a story of his movement from atheism to Christianity, and it involves, again, these discussions with Tolkien. There are all kind of YouTube biographies about him. One of my favorite autobiographies is his autobiography, and it's called Surprised by Joy. Mm-hmm. And the title refers to the fact that he's surprised by the joy that he finds in accepting Christ. But it's a wonderful biography. One of the things about his books that he's written is none of them are really extremely long. So he's got his mother who dies. He's got this woman who's 20 years older that he supports for 20 years. And then when he's about, 55 years old, he meets a woman, never been married to this point, meets a woman by the name of Joy Davidman. And she's an American. She's a divorcee. She had an abusive husband. And she's come to England. And they talk, and her visa runs out, and they want to deport her. And so, to avoid her being deported, he marries her.
Oh, really?
And there's no romantic entanglement in this. And then it turns out that after he marries her, turns out she's got cancer, and the cancer apparently is terminal. And so he then marries her in the Church of England. And this shouldn't happen because she's a divorcee, and so he has to get a minister friend.
A waiver, basically,
exactly.
right?
Well, the minister kind of did it unauthorized. So, but at any rate, but the thing he liked about her is that she was his intellectual eagle. She was really a very, very smart woman. But over time, and it's a short period of time because they're only married for 4 years, because then she dies, he comes to love her very, very deeply. In fact, one of the last things that he wrote was a short book called Grief Observed, and it's kind of his personal going through the grief process, and it was very, very poignant for him.
That is one of the few that I have read.
Have you really?
Because
okay.
it was presented to me. This was part of a class, but it was presented to us in the classes. Here is this person who has every excuse to be a cantankerous cynic because of their life experience, and now read this. Talking about grief, this person is hopeful, happy, feels that the world is a great place for the most part.
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah,
and that was fascinating to me when you consider what he'd been through.
Yeah, if you're interested in that relationship, there's a movie that came out. It's about 30 years old now, but it's called Shadowlands, and it's a story of his relationship with Joy Davidman. So it's just part of her life, and it's a wonderful movie. That. It's a terrific movie. So the last part, in terms of kind of the biographical sketch, was he dies November 22nd, 1963 at age 64. Do you recall, by any chance, what else happened on November 22nd, 1963?
That was a bad day.
It was a very bad day.
And I remember reading once, too, that this is why people were shocked weeks later to hear that he had also died on that same day.
Here's a guy who's generally considered to be probably the greatest Christian writer of the 20th century. And his death goes, like you kind of hinted at, essentially unnoticed because it was the same day that Kennedy was assassinated.
I remember reading, I don't remember who wrote it. It wasn't Lewis, but obviously he had died. But I remember it was a journalist who had written saying, talking about the shock of they were just doing something 2 weeks after Kennedy's assassination. And it was sort of, and this was, obviously pre-internet days, but it was like, wait, what? C.S. Lewis died? And then that became a news story 2 weeks after his death.
Yeah, once the Kennedy thing had kind of dissipated. He had an interesting life. He as a writer, he excelled in really three areas. One, he was, like I said, a scholar at Oxford and Cambridge, and he was one of the world's experts in medieval and Renaissance literature. He was a writer of fiction that we'll talk a little bit about. And he was a Christian apologist in the sense of a defender of Christianity. With regard to his literature, that's not really what I want to talk so much about today, but it's what most people are familiar with. He wrote actually two major series of literature. The first of those interestingly enough, is a science fiction trilogy. It's actually called a space trilogy, and I just finished reading one of them about a couple of months. It's called Perlandra, and it's the story of a guy who is transported to Venus, and there on Venus he encounters people that are kind of representative of Adam and Eve.
Okay.
And what happens there is that Eve is a little smarter and she doesn't succumb to Satan, and so the fall of man is avoided.
Interesting.
And the first one
takes
has
a whole different trajectory.
Yeah, exactly. yeah. But it has these kind of religious overtones. I read probably 15 or 20 of his books. It actually was the only one that I didn't like, and the reason was because it has page after page of just kind of descriptions of what Venus is like. But so he wrote one.
That's a problem with science fiction sometimes in general.
Yeah. But of course, the one the thing that he's most famous for, at least in terms of popular culture, is the Chronicles of Narnia, which went for 7 volumes and sold 100 million copies.
Wow.
And it's children's literature. The Space Trilogy was for adults. Narnia may or may not have been for children. You kind of raised the issue of we're not really sure on that. One of the things that people think about when they think about the Chronicles of Narnia is that woven into it are Christian themes. If you remember in the Chronicles, one of the main characters is this noble lion called Aslan. Mm-hmm. And Aslan is all wise and all kind and all knowing. And during the course of one of the books, Aslan actually is killed and he's resurrected. And people have come to understand that he really is representative of Jesus Christ. And there are other kinds of Christian themes there too.
Which makes the story really interesting.
Really interesting.
If you accept that allegory.
The interesting thing about it is Lewis claims that when he started the whole thing out, he really had no intent to have it include those Christian themes, and they just evolved through the writing period. Yeah, in fact, the thing that started the whole thing. Remember the story, the first one, the Lion, the Witch, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah.
Starts out with 4 kids who are taken out of London to protect them because it's World War II.
Yeah.
And they end up going to this house, and they find this wardrobe, and they go through it, and they find this whole new world. Lewis had encountered some kids who'd had the very same thing happen to him, and that was the kind of the germ of the idea.
Interesting.
For this, yeah.
That is, it's fascinating to me, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more later. But his impact, he is a household name, even if someone hasn't read a lot of his stuff. Other than, maybe like you said, the Chronicles of Narnia, or maybe they've even just seen the movies that were made recently or last 10 years or something on those. Everyone knows his name and knows a little bit about him, and yet he didn't. That wasn't a goal of his, right? He never wanted to be a famous author, or he was an academic.
Yeah, he was. He was, exactly, yeah.
Interesting. Craig Petersen here in the studio with us for the People Book Club this month, talking about not just one book by a single author, but the author himself, discussing the works and life of C.S. Lewis. If you would like to join us, 753-5868. We'll be back right after this.
Ah, that's better. Trade in the stresses of building a new home for relaxation. Visionary Homes Priority is giving you a stress-free building experience. Named the best home builder in northern Utah, Visionary Homes team will guide you seamlessly through the home building process. Call today, 435-228-4702, or visit visionaryhomes.com to learn more about upcoming communities in Nibley, Logan, and Smithfield. Visionary Homes, built for living, built for you.
Why was the basketball court all wet? Because the players kept dribbling on it.
The dad joke. Corny, groan-worthy, but also one of the simplest ways to share a moment with your kids.
What did the buffalo say when he dropped his son off for school? Bye, son.
So take a moment to make your kid laugh, because dad jokes rule. Make your kid laugh today. Go to fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Wonder if you should get tested for colorectal cancer? Well, it's the second leading cancer killer in the U.S., and screening helps prevent it. So if you're 50 or older, it's time. Even if it doesn't run in your family. Most often, colorectal cancer occurs in people with no family history. And it doesn't always cause symptoms, especially early on, so don't wait for symptoms to get tested. Screening helps prevent the disease by finding precancerous polyps so they can be removed. Remove the polyp, prevent the cancer. Screening also helps find colorectal cancer early when treatment works best. You might be thinking, oh no, not that test. But here's the thing, you have options. There's more than one screening test. Talk to your doctor to find the one that's right for you. No more excuses. If you're over 50, get tested, because colorectal cancer screening really does save lives. A message from HHS and CDC's Screen for Life campaign.
Feels like Tuesday. Tuesday has no feel.
Welcome back to KVN News For the People. In studio with Craig Petersen here for the For the People Book Club. We're talking about the life and work of C.S. Lewis. Normally here each month, the first Tuesday of each month, we pick a book, or Craig rather picks a book, and we talk about it. But this month, Craig is talking about the life and work of a very, very impactful author. Even if you haven't read a single thing he's written, you know the name. You've probably been influenced by him in some way or another. And then, interestingly enough, this was everything he didn't want. He never wanted to be famous. He was an academic. We're talking about C.S. Lewis here on the For the People Book Club, and we'll keep that conversation going on the other side of these headlines with KVNU's Bill Walter.
Thank you, Jason. KVNU News Time is 5:31, and the news is brought to you by the Duck Hunter. Cache Valley and the world lost an icon in the thrill ride industry on January 2nd when Stan Checketts passed away. Checketts was 80 years old and was known as an entrepreneur, thrill seeker, and outdoorsman. Checketts passed away peacefully at his home in Providence. Checketts was known around the world for his thrill rides, from bungee towers to vertical thrill rides to zip lines. Rides that Checketts designed can be found in 28 countries around the world. Checketts and his wife Sandy founded S&S Sports in 1994 and began manufacturing bungee jumping and trampoline equipment. The freestanding bungee towers were the first of their kind. The company also built a first-of-its-kind trampoline that incorporated bungee towers on the side, and the creations are seen at street fairs and amusement parks worldwide. Soon after, Checketts invented the use of pneumatic power for vertical thrill rides to launch riders without the slow momentum of a hill. Perhaps the most notable of these rides is Big Shot atop the Stratosphere in Las Vegas. In 1997, Stan was named the Entrepreneur of the Year by USA Today. Checketts later opened the Celebration Center in Logan in 2006 to provide opportunities for families in Cache Valley to experience some of its creations. It was also used as a venue to debut new thrill ride concepts. One of Checketts' newer thrill rides was the Soaring Eagle zip line, a first-of-its-kind zipline concept that easily brought riders back to the starting platform. Besides creating thrills for millions of others around the world, Checketts himself was an adventurer who loved to snowmobile and hike in the outdoors. And Checketts annually created a warming hut in Providence Canyon that was open to anyone needing a break from the snow and the cold. Police said they are investigating after an alleged attempted child abduction in Farmington. Officials said they were notified around 3 o'clock Monday afternoon of an incident that took place at the Arrowgate Townhomes. KUTV reports a 9-year-old boy was walking his dog when two men in their 30s approached him. One man was wearing a black beanie and black gloves. Police said he asked the child where he lived. Second man had a bald head and a beard, also wearing black clothes and gloves. Police said he asked the child, "Are you alone?" The second man reportedly grabbed the child's shoulders, and the dog barked and bit the man as he did so. Officers said the two men then ran away to a nearby white van and drove out of the neighborhood. And attorneys for a death row inmate say Idaho Governor Brad Little does not have the legal authority to overrule the state parole board's commutation recommendation, and they are taking the matter to court. Gerald Ross Pizzuto Jr. has been on death row for 35 years after being convicted for the July 1985 slayings of two gold prospectors at a cabin near McCall. He is dying of cancer, and last month the Idaho Commission of Pardons and Parole recommended his sentence be changed to life in prison. The governor rejected the recommendation. Pizzuto's attorneys say that Idaho's constitution gives the parole board, not the governor, final say on the matter. KVNU News Time is 5:35.
How often should you change the filter on your furnace? A lot of people are surprised when they find out that most filters are only good for 60 to 90 days. Some cheaper filters won't even last that long. If you buy a good quality filter, you should still have it checked or replaced every year. Doing this will make sure your furnace runs more efficiently and keep the air that you breathe cleaner. For a free consultation, call the Duct Hunter, 770-4813.
KVNU weather for tonight. We do have the winter storm warning still in effect until 5 p.m. Thursday for the mountain areas, and also southwest Wyoming, Bear Lake and Bear River valleys included in that winter storm warning. A winter weather advisory for us. Chance of snow this evening. Snow after midnight. Accumulation up to 2 inches. Overnight low in the lower 20s. Rain and snow Wednesday morning. Snow likely in the afternoon tomorrow. 1 to 3 inches. High temperature in the upper 30s. It was 33 today, and right now it's 29 at KVNU. KVNU weather is brought to you by Northern Steel Buildings. Contact their Cache Valley team to protect what's yours at northernsteelbuilding.com. Value from concept to construction. Call 435-677-7300. For more details on these and other stories, visit CacheValleyDaily.com.
Joe Biden doesn't have a plan as we continue to set new COVID highs every single day. We'll break down the latest insanity from Dr. Fauci and all of Biden's misguided advisors. Plus, Buck, what else we got?
The redistricting fight is something you need to know about. Are Republicans getting a little weak when they should be strong? Could this determine control of Congress? We'll get into that with our friend Ryan Grodowski coming up today on the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show.
10 to 1 on News Talk KVNU, 102 FM at 610 AM.
Hey, it's me, your cell phone. We need to talk about something serious. I know you love me. I know you like using me wherever you are, but I feel like this isn't working out when you're driving. I know you may think that it's possible to focus both on me and the road, but I just don't feel the same way. I think we should spend time away from each other when you're driving. It's for the best.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People Book Club with our good friend Craig Petersen here in studio. This month, instead of focusing on a single book by a single author, we're focused on the author, talking primarily, entirely about C.S. Lewis this week, or this month. And we've covered, we got through the biography, just an amazing story of this man's life and conversion, if you will, to Christianity. And then he died in 1963, known at that time as a Christian scholar, a writer of fantasy and even science fiction, as we've discussed. But his goal was to be. He was an academic in his own mind. Is that fair to
I think
say?
Yeah, he was. He was a classicist. I mean, most of his life was spent studying the classics and so forth. As you read his autobiography, Surprised by Joy, you find that he had just a kind of an inordinate quest for knowledge, and particularly he was interested in Norse mythology. He was interested in medieval literature.
Interesting.
I mean, he was kind of a Renaissance man. He was almost a prototypical college professor, the one you'd think would be sitting in a study in a tweed coat, reading a book all day, every day. That was kind of C.S. Lewis.
Now that's starting to remind me a bit of you.
No, I don't think so.
This is one of the most fascinating things about you is I don't know if it's fair to describe it as a quest for knowledge, but you have no limit to the topics you'll read about, the things you're curious about, the interests that you'll pick up as far as taking in new information. And that reminds me a bit of, as I'm sitting here in the studio, I'm just realizing this. It reminds me a bit of what little I know about C.S. Lewis's approach to knowledge.
I describe myself more as a goofball.
Well, that's important too, though. We need those.
There's not much of a market for them.
That's right. It is hard to monetize, I've found myself. But no, this is... It's fascinating to me because I've always admired people like you and like what you described as C.S. Lewis here, of C.S. Lewis, that it's sad to me when a person stops learning or loses interest, loses all curiosity for life in general. And that's one of the things I do know about him from my limited reading of C.S. Lewis is that he was fascinated seemingly by everything. And he didn't hate those who disagreed with him. In fact, he seemed to try and make friends with them. Or at least superficially pretend to.
I think that's true. We talked about him as a scholar. We talked about him as a writer of fiction. But I'd like to spend a little bit of time kind of talking about him as a Christian writer, now as a Christian apologist. And he wrote probably 15 different books. And again, they're short. They're typically 100, 150 pages.
Sure.
But the two that are the most famous that I'd like to talk about today are... First one called Mere Christianity. And I had a friend come up to me years and years ago, and he just read Mere Christianity, and he said, Craig, this book changed my life. And it had that impact on a lot of people. I mean, it really did. But it had kind of an interesting origin. And the origin was this. It was World War II, the bombing of London, people are despondent and so forth. They came to C.S. Lewis, and they said, would you do a series of radio talks? And so over the course of 2 or 3 years, he gave 15-minute radio talks to the general public. And it was interesting. Winston Churchill was doing the same thing, but C.S. Lewis's talks were as influential as those of Winston Churchill. And so those 15-minute talks ended up being compiled into this book. And then the title's interesting. It's titled Mere Christianity. A better title might have been Basic Christianity, because the term Mere Christianity is intended to imply that all I'm going to talk about are the things that unite us, not the things that divide us. Okay. And at the very beginning of the book, in fact, I think it's in the preface, he says, think of a great hall, and the great hall has openings into many, many doors. And so Mere Christianity is the great hall of common beliefs, and from that, people can open the doors and go into the individual sects with their different beliefs and so forth. But what he tried to come to is kind of a common set of beliefs. In fact, first part of the book isn't really religious at all. He argues that in the world, throughout history and throughout cultures, there's kind of a common set of beliefs that everybody believes in. The belief in that we shouldn't kill each other, beliefs in honesty, not that we abide by them, but at least that people accept those common beliefs.
We at least profess to hold them important as important commandments in the case of the Bible.
Yeah, and then he kind of goes on from there to talk about the fundamental beliefs of Christianity that pretty much everybody can agree on. And the other book, I'll come to that later, but what I'd like to do, if it's okay, Jason, for a minute or two, is to go into Mere Christianity. And I pulled out maybe a dozen of his most famous quotes.
Okay.
And just to talk about those. And what I'd like the readers to kind of look for is notice the clever analogies, and notice in many cases the almost perfect wording, and also the pretty deep insights. And so these are just kind of random excerpts from the book Mere Christianity.
Okay.
So the first one, and I've kind of picked these not to be particularly religious. They're more moralistic in nature. First one has some religious overtones, but the others don't so much. He said, one of the great debates in Christianity is the debate between are we saved by faith or are we saved by works? And you find religions being deeply divided on that. There have been wars fought basically on that premise, trying to defend that premise. And here's what he said about it. Regarding the debate about faith and works, it's like asking which blade in a pair of scissors is more important. The implication being that they don't work unless you have both blades.
Can't independently. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Second one says, I like this one too, Everyone says that forgiveness is a lovely idea. You know, lovely is kind of a characteristic word that you expect maybe an English scholar to use.
Sure.
Everyone says forgiveness is a lovely idea until they have something to forgive. Sure.
Which is very true.
I forgive everybody. I'm the most forgiving person in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Until I come up to a specific circumstance where someone's done me wrong. And then,
it's a bit tougher.
Yeah, right. Then I'm going to preach forgiveness to you.
It's true. Very human.
Okay. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. To be humble is to be focused not so much on yourself, but on other people.
Interesting.
And then remember we mentioned a little bit earlier this talk by Ezra Taft Benson that's become kind of a classic in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And Lewis in Mere Christianity says the following. And Ezra Taft Benson actually quotes, not exactly, but at least this general idea. Lewis says, pride is competitive. Pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more than the next man. We say that people are proud of being rich or clever or good-looking, but they're not. They're proud of being richer, clever, or better-looking than other people. So the notion is that it's only as we judge ourselves on a comparative standard that we find satisfaction in what we've achieved.
That is, it's interesting that is so simple, and yet that's very profound. Because to think about that issue of pride, as I've always understood it, and to put that in that perspective, that it's not this threshold you've determined as an individual, that it's, well, I'm richer than this guy,
yeah,
or I look better than that guy,
better than Joneses,
and then that's where the issue with pride comes. That's fascinating.
I thought so too. And then, kind of related to that, he says, if you think that you're not conceited, then you're very conceited indeed. The ultimate conceit is to not be conceited.
I'm the most humble person ever.
I used to have a friend who used to talk about confident humility, and he talked about it seriously.
Confident humility, I like that.
And then just two more. This one again is more religious in nature, but I want you to think about how cleverly he's used the words in this. He says, I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. But notice the phrase, I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen. As you read the text, sun is S-U-N, but you could just as well talk about it as capital S-O-N. Okay. The sun has risen. So there's kind of a really clever dual meaning there.
That is interesting.
And then the last one. The last one I have some personal experience. My wife and I served a mission in Slovenia. And while we were there, we taught two individuals. One of them was a lawyer. I think, as I look back on it, I think maybe they were more interested in being able to practice their English than learning about religion. But I was too not naive and idealistic to think about the time.
You have to give them something for being, clever and in their opportunism.
Yeah, at least they sat there and listened to me for probably 15, 20 hours total over a series of times. But the one man, Peter, when we talked about Christ, he would say, wasn't Jesus a revolutionary? Wasn't Jesus a great moral teacher? And when you're serving on a mission, kind of the notion is that you don't indulge people forever. If there's an indication that they really aren't serious about learning and making a change in your life, then maybe you move on. And so at one point I said, I thought about this notion of Jesus as a great moral teacher. And so I sent him an email. And the email I sent was one of the most famous of C.S. Lewis's quotes, and it's referred to as the Lewis trilemma. And I'll explain what that means in just a moment. Let me read it to you. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things that Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on a level with a man who says he's a poached egg, or else the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman, or something worse. So basically, the trilemma is Christ has to be who he said he was, he has to be a madman, or he has to be basically the devil. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come up with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great moral teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. So I sent that as an email, and about a day later I got an email back saying, I think we're done with the lessons.
So you got your answer on whether they were serious about using your time.
Yeah. Clearly I offended him. I probably should have been more tactful.
That's perfectly handled, though, because that quote, I've always thought that quote was... It's funny, when you're first presented for the first time in your life with that specific piece of writing, I think everyone reacts to that defensively, almost. Like you feel challenged in some way, regardless of what you believe or don't believe. You feel challenged in some way. But that's exactly what he's saying, is that when it comes to this type of thing, well, I mean, really, that you either believe Jesus Christ was the Son of God, or a crazy person on a box on the street corner. It's got to be one of the two.
You can't sit on the fence. Okay. Now I got to get to the screw tape.
That's fascinating,
because the screw tape letters are maybe his most. I don't know, one of his most interesting writings. And they actually appeared as 31 newspaper articles. And the way it works is the following. In the screw tape letters, there are 4 people that appear in each one of these 31 letters in one way or another. The first of those is a head devil. He's kind of a supervisor devil, and his name is Screwtape. And he's tutoring an apprentice devil, and the apprentice devil's name is Wormwood. The name comes from a term that's used in the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
And so at the end of all of these letters, he starts out by saying, "My dear Wormwood," and then he ends up by saying, "Your affectionate Uncle Screwtape." And you're going to see that's in a minute, okay? So there's those two, and then the third one is the patient, and the patient is a human being. And the human being is the person that this apprentice tempter, Wormwood, is supposed to be tempting. And then the final fourth person is a person that's always referred to only as the enemy. And the enemy is God. Because remember, we're talking about the devils, okay?
Sure.
And so what's happening in each of these letters is Wormwood apparently has reported back on his interaction with the patient, and then Screwtape is giving his evaluation and advice. And it's just, first of all, I think the device of him doing this, Lewis said that of all the things he wrote, this was the easiest thing he ever wrote, but also the most unpleasant. In fact, he never ever attempted to do it again. But let me just take 5 or 6 of these in terms of the advice, because I think the advice is really kind of clever, and it's kind of how we're tempted and kind of about human nature. First thing he says, so he's talking to Wormwood and telling him how to deal with the patient. He says, when 2 humans have lived together for many years, it usually happens that each one has tones of voice and expressions of faces that are almost unendurably irritating to the other person. Work on that, perpetuate that, on these things that irritate each other.
That is interesting.
And then a second one, he says, talk to him about moderation in all things. Get him to believe that religion is okay up to a point. A moderated religion is as good as no religion at all, and a lot more amusing. As long as he retains external habits of being a Christian, he can think of someone who has found a few new friends and had a few bad habits, but whose spiritual state is as good as it used to be. So it's okay. Be satisfied with kind of a lukewarm Christian. And then a third one. Murder is no better than cards if cards can do the trick. Indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope without sudden turnings and without signposts. Next one. Now he's talking about prayer. He says, don't forget to use the heads I win, tails you lose argument. If the thing he prays for doesn't happen, it's proof that prayers don't work. If it does happen, convince him that it would have happened anyway because of natural events. A granted prayer can be as good a proof that prayers are ineffective as a denied one. And then just 2 more. Convince him that his virtues are conditional on circumstances. And I thought this was wonderful. Think about Pontius Pilate in the Bible. And Lewis writes, Pilate was merciful until it became risky. If you remember, Pilate was willing to exonerate Jesus until he realized that it was going to cause political problems with the Jews. And then he backed down because
suddenly
it was
not a good idea.
Yeah. And then finally, the very last one, and what's happened in this lecture 31 is that the patient has been lost. He's been converted. He's done the right things. I'm not sure whether he died or not, but at least that Wormwood had been successful. And Wormwood has always said, "Your affectionate Uncle Screwtape." And so in this letter he asked, "You ask if my terms of affection mean nothing. Love you? Of course. As dainty a morsel as I ever grew fat on." And then this time he signs it, "Your increasingly ravenous, affectionate uncle." And the implication is that he's going to eat him.
That's where things are going to land.
That's where
He's going to eat him.
yeah.
That is the Screwtape letters, by the way, just as widely available online and off as Mere Christianity, as the Chronicles of Narnia. In fact, it's pretty easy to get most of what C.S. Lewis wrote. I've linked to some of it on our Facebook page. We've got one last break here. Craig Petersen, our guest here for the For the People Book Club. We do have a caller on the line as well. Elwood, hold tight. We'll be back right after this.
Pristine wilderness can still be found in the West, where creeks run freely and historic apple trees still bear fruit. Maple Creek Ranch features breathtaking canyon views and opportunities for real estate development. 2.5-acre lots are now available with adjacent wilderness areas that provide endless riding and recreational possibilities. So find your piece of paradise just 35 minutes from Logan at Maple Creek Ranch. Schedule your appointment online at maplecreekranch.net.
Welcome back to KVN News For the People Book Club. We have just about 4 minutes left in the hour. We've been talking C.S. Lewis, his life, his work as a Christian scholar, as a writer of fantasy and science fiction, as a teacher, as a convert to Christianity at the age of 30-something. Just a fascinating life. Craig Petersen, our guest here again. And Craig, to wrap things up here, we do have a caller on the line, Eldon, with a comment on C.S. Lewis. Eldon, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was helpful to let you know, but one of the local bookstores has pretty much his whole collection, about 30 books, including Paralandra and the Space Trilogy, which I think is out of print now.
Wow.
So just thought I'd pass that on to you if that's
sure
helpful information for you.
Which one is your favorite?
Of all of his books?
Yeah.
I think the metaphorical imagery in The Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe, The Last Battle, and The Magician's Nephew, those are the three when you look at the metaphors. But his other books, like now my mind went blank, the one on Heaven, the Bus.
That's not The Great Divorce, is it? No.
Yes, The Great Divorce, thanks. I think I like his metaphorical books. The other ones are fun to read too, but they're all very helpful. The Problem of Pain and other ones.
Yeah.
So
fascinating.
But like I said, he has about 30 books that the store has, and so.
And which store is that? Go ahead, and you can mention the.
It's Oasis Books downtown.
Okay.
It's a Christian bookstore, right?
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So the C.S. Lewis collection can be purchased locally, even. Perfect.
Yeah, pretty much all the books that he's ever written. So I just wanted to pass it on just for your listeners to be aware that they can get shopped locally, too.
Yeah, we're always glad to hear that, especially on a topic as broad as this, that you can pick them up locally. So, Eldon, thank you.
Yep, no problem. Thanks.
That is welcome news that you can get these locally. And as Eldon mentioned, a lot of his stuff is out of print, but it never seems to stay out of print permanently. Which speaks, I think, to his legacy a bit too. There's a hunger for his challenging writings, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned the Space Trilogy is out of print. I think that's because it's not up to quite the same level as some of his other writings.
Sure. That was one you didn't enjoy it.
I really didn't enjoy it a whole lot. Yeah, I thought it was tedious.
Man, a lot to read, though. For listeners, I've linked to some of the places where you can read more about C.S. Lewis, his life and his work. As Eldon mentioned, most of his books can be purchased at a bookstore right here in Logan, Oasis Books, which is good to know. You can buy those locally. And Craig Petersen, always a pleasure. This has been a special treat, though, to spend an entire hour on an author's entire body of work.
Yeah, mine too.
I'm excited to see what you come up with next month. For listeners, I'm excited you were able to tune in. I hope you'll stay with us throughout the week. We'll be spotlighting the upcoming legislative session, taking a look at the work of the Cashwater District, and more here on For the People. Dave Ramsey is next here on KVNU Logan.